Let's get ready to rumble!
Yes, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome back. Obviously, we're still covering what's going on with Don Lemons because this is not over with. It's not over with. Like I said, a lot of people have come out to defend Don Lemons. Stephen A. Smith, all people comes out to defend him. And so today we're gonna watch Stephen A. Smith defense. There's a few parts in the clip or in the whole this video that he has that I want to get into, but Stephen A. Smith will step up to the plate to defend Don Lemons. All right, and then I'll give you a little background about why I think this is kind of crazy, or even that I'm surprised that Stephen A. Smith is going to come out and do it. But let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start off.
Face Act. Now, having said all of that, let's get down to the nuts and bolts of this. You're violating his First Amendment rights. First of all, there's the issue of freedom of speech. Secondly, there's his freedom as a journalist, freedom of the press. And whether you like it or not, Don Lemon is a member of the press. Don Lemon has been in journalism for 30 years, if not more. Don Lemon worked at CNN for 17 years. And just because you don't have a specific organization that you're working for, that's where the word independence comes from. It doesn't mean that your journalism credentials are stripped. Not when you've been doing it for decades like him. Let's understand that.
So obviously, this is the biggest issue here, right? Is that there's a pit between freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom to protest against the freedom of religious worship or freedom of religions. And a lot of the things that they're doing is they're focusing on one right, because to me, it sounds like they keep saying that the one right trumps the right of religion. Now, obviously, in this country, we've seen a dynamic shift when it comes to how people view religion, particularly Christianity as a whole. And so even Stephen A. Smith here seems to be falling into the freedom of the press or the freedom of religion or the freedom of protest is trumps the freedom of religious expression, religious, the freedom to go out and worship, right? Without any obstruction, interference of any kind. But the biggest argument that they keep having is that this is like muddy waters when it comes to when one First Amendment right goes against another First Amendment right. Right. And so Stephen A. Smith, again, here, he's making the same issue here, which is that Don Lemon, because he's a journalist, he's been a journalist for so long, that gives him a get out of free jail card. That's basically what they're insinuating, is that because Don Lemon went in there and he's a journalist and he's been doing it for 30-something years, would you do the same exact excuse for people that have been doing it for a long time? If a retired cop does something wrong, would you then excuse it and say, well, he's been a cop for so long and all this? Would you do this for any type of other profession? That's my question to Stephen A. Smith, right? To Stephen A. Smith. And you're going to see how Stephen A. Smith actually, a few times in this clip, actually goes against Don Lemons. But then he retracts because of this. Oh, he's still a journalist at heart. He's still a journalist.
This is straight BS what he's going through. But I tell you the story that everybody's missing from this. Everybody is missing this story, okay? Not only did we know that the president is petty and vindictive, just look at James Comey. Let's look at Letitia James. Let's look at Jack Smith. Just look at, John Bolton.
My thing is with the thing with these things, right, is that Stephen A. Smith is basically saying like Trump is the one sending this stuff. Trump has barely said anything about Don Lemons. He hasn't said much about anything about that. It's been the DOJ. And the fact is, here's the thing. It really wasn't much of the president doing this. I've seen on X people like Dave French. Yes, David French, who by no means I would consider him to be a conservative Christian. Dave Smith is one of those guys where they are under the apparently under Christianity, but they're very liberal. And they're very critical of MAGA and stuff like that. When you have a guy like David French saying something as saying that was wrong, that Don Lemon should have, he was actually pissed. He was actually pissed off. I see people, professors of the CBS and stuff like that, a lot of pastors throughout saying this was wrong. A big guy like Andrew T. Walker, basically saying, ethically speaking, this is horrible. Well, but for me, I thought it was crazy when I saw David French actually commenting and saying that what Don Lemons and what these people did was wrong. So it's not about Trump. It's not about Trump being vindictive, about his DOJ being weaponized and all that crap, because that's what he eventually. Listen to this.
A vindictive tour. That much is obvious. You're clearly weaponizing law enforcement in this country.
How are you weaponizing it, though? This is the problem. How are you weaponizing it? Don Lemons knew what he was doing. By the way, Stephen A. Smith will actually point out that he knew. If you watch this whole thing in the beginning, he even said that it looks like Don Lemons knew the plan. He understood it. We have the clips. There's no way around this. He knew what he was doing. But the way that these people are they're just batting back for Don Lemons is crazy stuff. And I actually want to get to that. Right? He actually does it several times. And here, let me get it right.
That's what's going on here. And it's coming from me, along with many, many others. I'm not one that thinks it was particularly wise for Don Lemon to go into that church. I say a house of worship, don't go there. Don't go there. That would have been me. Get them when they're coming outside. Don't go into it. You know, it's private property. Who knows what they can charge you with, particularly with this administration. I didn't think it was the wisest.
With this administration, bro, with any administration, period. You trespass, you're gonna get your ass in trouble. It don't matter who, Stephen A. Smith. It don't matter what. It could have been the Biden administration. It could have been the freaking Bush administration. It could have been, I don't know, any administration, bro. The George Washington administration. It don't matter. Even here, he is acknowledging that doing such a thing in a house of worship would be considered trespassing. So you're still going to get in trouble, whether you're a journalist, whether you're claiming that you're just chronicling, whether you're just filming. I don't give a shit. These people, he's acknowledging it. He even said it. I don't think it was wise. So why should we give him a pass? What kind of defense is this, bro? And this is the problem with Stephen A. Smith. He says it several times. I'm going to show you. He admits it several times. It wasn't the smartest, wisest thing to do. But because he's a journalist, I guess naivety and ignorance is okay, right?
Thing for him to do, to go into that church, knowing how knowledgeable he is, knowing how smart he is, knowing how accomplished he has been as a journalist. I just felt like, hey, you know what? That wasn't the wisest thing to do, but he knew what he was doing.
Exactly. He knew what he was doing. But in other places, he's acting like he don't know what the FACE Act did. He doesn't know that if he's trespassing in the middle of a service. Don Lemons, his own live stream dictates that he knew what was going to happen prior to even him going into the church. There is the segment of him saying to the camera, they know this is a clandestine operation. I'm not turning off the mics. I'm going to do this. I know what we're doing. And Stephen A. Smith is basically saying, it's not the wisest thing. So then why would you then excuse this behavior? Why would you excuse it? Stephen A. Smith is admitting that he knew, that Don Lemon knew what he was doing. You would not defend other people with this bullshit. You would not be like, I knew that it was wrong to trespass into this building, but, you know, it just wasn't the wisest things for me to do. Bro, a lot of that's not going to fly in court and anywhere else. It wasn't the wisest thing for me to do. And then he's using experience against Don Lemon. So what more proof do you need? How then you defend it? Basically, Stephen said 30 years of journalism. He's been in different situations, so he would have known. He should have known it wasn't the wisest thing to do. And yet, Stephen A. Smith says, does the but right.
And it was clearly a risk that he was willing to take. How Trump and them have reacted to it all is the pathetic part of it.
It's not pathetic, bro. You just gave us the answer. Don Lemon knew what he was doing. You even said it's unwise. All that experience thrown to shits because he wanted to make a statement. He wanted to be there. Don Lemon hates Christians, my boy. He hates Christianity. I wish Stephen A. Smith would look at the podcast that he did with Jennifer Waltz and listen to how he talks about Christians. I wonder if that would change his mind about him. He went in there looking for the instigation. He went in there looking for the, like, oh, maybe there's going to be a nice little drama. Maybe the Christians are going to push back. I think that's what Don Lemon's going to say. Right? Let's go ahead and play another clip. Another part of this. I believe it's right here.
I repeat, I didn't think it was the wisest thing for Don Lemon to walk into a church.
Yo, you see this, right? Because Stephen A. Smith, as smart as he is, and other people would say the same, keep telling the same thing. I don't think it was the wisest thing to do. So then why do you excuse it? Especially for a grown-ass man who apparently has all the experience in the world. You wouldn't do this to nobody else. I've seen Stephen A. Smith rip when he does his ESPN shit, rip quarterback, all type of players. Talking about that's no excuse for them. They've been playing for so long. So why are you then going back and forth to protect Don Lemons? And you just keep admitting it wasn't the wisest thing. Just because you know it wasn't the wisest thing. But apparently, it's okay. Because he was just doing his freedom of protest, the freedom of the press, whatever, blah, 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 blah. He was doing all that. So even if it was a stupid move, I respect it. Shut up, man.
Even if it was as a reporter, because religion gets dicey.
But not for Don Lemons. These people, it's because these people don't they don't sit back and listen to how Don Lemon talks about religion. He doesn't think Christianity is a legit, he doesn't care about Christianity. He doesn't believe that Jesus was the person that he is. Remember, every time you hear Don Lemon talk about Christianity or any type of religion, that's not how I practice my own Christianity, right? The way when he asked the pastor, wouldn't Jesus love these people? Don Lemon wouldn't know what the hell Jesus was talking about because Don Lemon doesn't really practice Christianity. Don Lemon doesn't really practice any of the orthodox teachings of Christianity. So how would he know what Jesus thinks? Besides the fact that he just cherry picks whatever he thinks is good in the Bible. Stephen A. Smith, you're right. A smart person would know when you're messing with religion, right? This is why. If you would have done, if this would have happened to a mosque, this would have been a crazy environment because Muslims are very, very not very tolerant of people messing with the religion. But Christians it tends to be a pushover religion most of the time nowadays, especially in the United States. Pushover, watered down shit. So you wouldn't do this to a Muslim. You wouldn't do this to a Buddhist or a Hindu temple, but you do it to a church because you know Christianity doesn't push back. Because you know that just in this country for the last few years, Christianity has been a step over religion. So yeah, religion is dicey, Stephen A. Smith. But Don Lemon doesn't give a shit about Christianity. He don't care. He thinks they're all white supremacist, entitled individuals. He doesn't care about it being religious or being dicey. I'm sorry.
It's where the face act and other things come into play. It gets dicey. It's not something I would have done.
Right, because you have brains and you have some kind of respect for Christianity. Don Lemon has no respect. The way he dissed Christianity, the way he talks about Christians, Don Lemon had no respect. So in his head, when he was going to go do that, he didn't give a shit. But he knew that it was wrong. He knew that it was unwise. He didn't give a shit, Stephen A. Smith. So you defending him because he's just a journalist and he's been doing this for a very long time, and because you think that Trump is a petty ching has nothing. The fact that even if Trump is being petty or vindictive has nothing to do with it. Him being, you're saying it's an unwise move, doesn't excuse it. The man knew what he was doing. The man had experience. The man should have known better. You're right. And he still did it anyways because the man doesn't give a shit about Christianity.
That doesn't mean he didn't know better.
No, duh.
People joked.
He knew better, bro. And that's the thing about it. And he went back. He got on his live and he doubled down. And then the next day he doubled down even more. He came out of when he was arrested. He doubled down even more. The dude knew what he was doing. He don't give a shit. He didn't give a shit. And these guys are batting for him. They're bringing him back. Now, he brings on his, obviously, Stephen A. Smith is a Democrat. He said he's a modern Democrat because he leans left. Or independent, I'm sorry. A moderate independent, but he leans more left. But he brings on a guy from CNN, right? A lawyer, obviously. He said this guy knows Don Lemon personally, so he's gonna back up his boy and stuff like that. And they talk about the FACE Act for a little bit. So let's see what they say about the FACE Act. And right here.
So too is freedom of speech. So too is freedom of the press. And I think that's why Don's case is going to be different than the other protesters, because he's going to simply argue, I was covering this as a journalist. I mean, if you look at Don's videos, he is doing what journalists do. He doesn't have the typical big brand name. It doesn't say CNN on his truck anymore. It doesn't say, ESPN or whatever on his truck. But what Don is doing, I mean, he's got over 1 million subscribers and followers on YouTube. You're showing clips of it right now. He's interviewing.
That don't mean shit. You have 1 million subscribers and stuff like that. So what? So the more subscribers you have as a streamer, it's okay to just break laws because you're streaming to 1 million people? That's irrelevant. Irrelevant.
Protesters and parishioners alike. He's talking to the people in the church. He's doing what journalists do. And I think any federal judge, when this case lands on his or her desk, is going to say this is protected First Amendment freedom of.
Again, protected. What about the Christians that were in there mid-service? Where is their right? Where is their right? It's easy to look how bad they're defending. They have no problem defending Don Lemon, right? Sourpuss Don Lemon, but they don't want to defend the pastor. They don't want to defend the people. We have videos of the kids. The indictment tells us that they were blocking people off. People were calling, what the fuck? What is he talking about? Now, here's the funny part in this whole thing. Watch. Because Don Lemon asked him a question. I believe this is it, where he says, have you seen anything like this before? You ready? Watch this.
About it. A blind person could see that. The issue, however, was going into that church. That's always a dicey situation in a place of worship, especially when you're interviewing a preacher and the preacher is telling you, or the pastor is telling you, he wants you to leave. Those kind of things. I was wondering whether or not that would hold any weight at all in your estimation.
I think that'll be part of the argument. But I think that, look, even if one believes the FACE Act is a good idea and constitutional, and even if one believes the people who stormed into that church should be prosecuted, and I've said on air, they did commit a crime. I mean, like it or not, they committed a crime. It's different when you're covering it. Now, look, if Don was pretending to...
He knew what he was doing. He went in there with those people. He was there, bro. He was there. A crime. He participated because he was part of the group. I think that's interesting. They keep saying that he was just a journalist and he was just being a journalist, but he was part of them. He went in there with them. He left when they left. He actually arrived with the group, went in, and then he still left with the group. Participation, right? Participation. Because if you're looking at anyone like this, well, he arrived with them, he knew the plan, he talked to the leaders of the thing, and he understood all of that, and he was in there with them. He was still part of the group. He was still part of the group. Now this guy says the protesters did commit a crime, so to him they should be charged, correct? So he said whether you believe it or not. Bro, y'all would have no problem with the abortion people that were getting arrested while they were singing and stuff. You had no problem arresting those things under Biden. One more thing, there's one more clip here I want to talk about. Let me
cover it. Well, a lot of people covered January 6th, right? CNN had people on the Capitol grounds with cameras showing what was happening on January 6th, and we didn't get prosecuted for that.
Because none of your guys went in there. Because your people, because the CNN people weren't stupid, the Fox people weren't stupid. They didn't go inside the Capitol. Because I think it would have been a different story if CNN told their people to go in there with them and follow the group and stuff like that, but they didn't. They stayed outside. They covered it from the outside. So obviously you're not going to get prosecuted from there. But Don Lemon went inside the church, fully knowing, as Stephen A. Smith repeatedly says, he knew what he was doing. He knew what he was doing. One more clip, one more part of this thing. And it talked about Stephen A. Smith brings out a point that I think is interesting.
When they were in power, per se, for lack of a better phrase, that remotely resembles anything like what the Trump administration and its DOJ is trying to pull off right now, whether it's the Obama administration, the Biden administration. Is there anything that you can think of that's transpired in recent memory when a Democrat was in power that would remotely come close to what we're witnessing happening with Don Lemon right now?
You are going to hear the name of one person, I forget the name, who was ostensibly sort of doing independent journalism on January 6th, who was charged with trespass around January 6th and then later pardoned in Trump's first day mass pardon. And watch for people to make that comparison. But I think there's a difference here. First of all, if that is the case, if that person was actually engaged in journalism, I don't think that person should have been charged. I don't know enough about the details of that case. I don't know if that person was actually engaged.
We covered that in my last video. It was Steve Baker. He was hit with 4 felony misdemeanors. He did not do anything else. Basically, almost the same exact thing as Don Lemon's. And he was charged. Now, obviously, like they said, Trump pardoned him, right? But they arrested Baker, made a big deal out of it. Baker was an independent journalist. Now he works for the Blaze. Same thing happened here. Now he's saying, I don't think he should have been charged, but he did get charged by the Biden administration under a Biden-appointed judge. They saw the law the way they thought they would see it. Interesting, isn't it?
In journalism, or was storming the Capitol with everyone else and happened to be a journalist. And it was a much lower level. And I don't mean that the level doesn't matter, but like Don is a legitimate.
What he meant to say there by the level don't matter was that the Capitol is not the same as a church, right? The 4 misdemeanors that they gave him, felony misdemeanors, he entered the Capitol, so it's not the same as entering a church. Even though a lot of people will call Steve Baker an insurrectionist, a traitor to the country, right? Don Lemon is not being called an insurrectionist, a traitor to nothing. Now, there are some conservatives that believe that he's disrespectful as hell and all that stuff, but I don't hear anything about Don Lemon being an insurrectionist, a traitor, none of that. But that's what Steve Baker got.
Journalists, right? You can't just, not everyone with a cell phone can claim they're a journalist. So they're going to use, I think you're going to see.
And by the way, you see how they always go back to the credentials, right? It's all about credentials. Ladies and gentlemen, it's all about the credentials. You have to have credentials. If you're going to commit a crime and you want to get away with it, according to these people, right, is you have to have credentials. Credentials will get you out of the way. If you have experience and you just play the dumb card, I know it was unwise, but I had to do it because people need to know the truth. That's a good defense. It's crazy. Now I'm gonna leave you with this, right? I'm gonna link the video to this, but Stephen A. Smith actually had beef with this man, Don Lemon. Don Lemon actually doesn't respect Stephen A. Smith. Don Lemon actually called him out, basically saying that Stephen A. Smith is working for the white man and all this stuff and all that. So it's crazy. It's funny to me to see like how Stephen A. Smith just came out and tried to defend and all this stuff like that. It's interesting. But I want you to look at that clip or look at that video of the beef that Stephen A. Smith had with Don Lemon and Joy Reid and Jasmine Crockett. And I think it's interesting how they react to one another. But guys, we're still early into this. We have to wait to see what happened with Don in court and how the DOJ is going to play this out and what's going to happen. But what are your comments on this? What do you think about Stephen A. Smith's comment? You think that did Stephen A. Smith lay a good defense out for Don Lemon? Do you think that any of the stuff that Stephen A. Smith said, because I saw it in his comments, this comment was not having it either. So clearly Stephen A. Smith is throwing out some stuff here, but to me, the defense is garbage. It's weak, and this guy doesn't do anything else either. Because again, they're pitting rights against rights, but all you keep hearing is the right to press, the right to protest, the right of speech. Apparently, trumps the right of religion. So let me know what you guys think. You think Stephen A. Smith built a good case? If not, let me know your thoughts. Don't forget, guys, to hit the like and subscribe button, guys. I appreciate everything you guys do. But guys, we'll see you on the next episode.